The sharp crack of the slap echoed through the vast living room. My cheek instantly flared with an unbearable, stinging pain. The ringing in my ears almost drowned out the screaming match unfolding before my eyes. "Ethan, you're a monster. How dare you push me?" Sophia Bell, dressed in a pristine white gown like a lily crushed by a merciless downpour, collapsed weakly onto the plush carpet. She clutched her wrist as tears welled, shimmering in her eyes. I held my burning cheek, staring at him in disbelief. I didn't even touch her. She tripped and fell toward me, and I moved away instinctively. That's why she fell. I didn't push her, my voice was flat. But my husband, Ethan Thorne, didn't even glance my way. He strode over to Sophia and helped her up as if she were the world's most precious jewel. He took her wrist in the same hands I had massaged countless nights to ease his fatigue. Now, those hands were tenderly examining another woman's injury, his expression a mask of heroic concern. "Does it hurt?" Ethan's voice was softer than he had ever spoken to me. Every word was a shard of ice stabbing into my heart. "Ethan, my hand. My piano hands." Sophia's sobs were theatrical, each one expertly crafted to trigger Ethan's guilt. "If I can't play, I'll have nothing left." Ethan's face darkened instantly. He lifted his head, his deep-set eyes finally finding me, but there was no warmth in them, only icy revulsion and an all-consuming rage. "Catherine, on your knees. Apologize to Sophia," he commanded. His voice was low, but carried an authority that tolerated no argument. My heart plummeted. The blood in my veins seemed to freeze. "I'll say it again. I did not push her." I straightened my back, meeting his glacial stare. 3 years of marriage had seen me become compliant and patient, smoothing away nearly all my sharp edges. But that didn't mean I would endure such a brazen lie. "Still talking back?" Ethan smirked, a cold, cruel twist of his lips. The contempt in that smile pricked me like a needle. "It seems I've been too lenient with you. You've forgotten your place." He let go of Sophia and began advancing on me, step by step. The shadow of his tall frame enveloped me completely. The familiar masculine scent of sandalwood and leather that I once loved now felt suffocating. "I'm giving you one last chance." He loomed over me. "On your knees. And if I don't?" I clenched my jaw, staring back defiantly. "Don't." Ethan acted as if he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. He nodded slowly, a dangerous glint in his eyes intensifying. "Fine, very fine. If you won't apologize, then you'll pay with your hands." My heart skipped a beat. A horrifying premonition seized me. "Ethan, what are you going to do?" "Sophia's hands are made for the piano. They're priceless. But your hands, what are they good for, besides chopping vegetables and washing clothes?" His gaze drifted dismissively to my hands. The same hands that had once prepared hundreds of precision medications for him. The same hands that had practiced suturing on pigskin for hours, covered in countless needle pricks. Since they're so useless, it's no great loss to destroy them. As soon as he finished speaking, the 2 bodyguards who had been standing impassively by the door approached me. They seized my arms and pinned me firmly to the floor. I began to struggle wildly, a primal terror gripping me. "Ethan, you can't do this. You're insane," I shrieked. "My hands hold a scalpel. You can't touch my hands." It was the secret I had kept for 3 years. I had never told him that I abandoned a brilliant career in theoretical physics to go into medicine, solely to cure the rare tumor in his brain. These hands, which I had trained through countless sleepless nights, were the only hope of saving his life. My scream, however, was met with an even crueler sneer. "A scalpel? Catherine Vance, you think holding a kitchen knife a few times makes you a doctor?" His laughter was colder than ice. "Stop using these pathetic lies to make me feel sorry for you." He gestured to the bodyguards. One of them produced a cold, metallic instrument from a portable case. I had never seen anything like it. It resembled a high-tech nutcracker, but it radiated a bone-chilling menace. "No, Ethan, you'll regret this. You will absolutely regret this," I screamed in desperation, watching the tool approach. Without a flicker of hesitation, the bodyguard grabbed my left hand and secured my index finger in the instrument's groove. The cold touch of the metal sent a shiver through me. "Ethan," I cast one last, pleading look at him, but he turned away, whispering gently to the weeping Sophia, "Sophia, don't be afraid. I'll get justice for you." As his words faded, the bodyguard began to slowly, millimeter by millimeter, tighten the vise. I could hear the faint whir of gears, feel the metal edges digging into my flesh. The pressure mounted until the bone gave way. Crack. The sharp, sickening sound of breaking bone echoed in the silent room. A searing pain exploded from my fingertip, shooting through my entire body like an electric current. My vision went black. I almost fainted. It wasn't just a break, it was the sound of a bone being mercilessly crushed to dust. My index finger bent at an unnatural angle, and blood instantly soaked the bodyguard's gloves. But it was only the beginning. They didn't stop. The instrument opened, then clamped down on my middle finger. Crack. My scream turned into an inhuman howl. The metallic taste of blood filled my throat. Through a blur of tears, I saw Sophia hiding in Ethan's embrace, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. And Ethan, my husband, the man I was going to dedicate my life to, never once looked back. Crack. Crack. The sound of my bones breaking followed, one after another, like a pendulum of death, methodically and relentlessly shattering my nerves. My initial screams subsided into muffled whimpers, and finally, I had no strength left even for tears. My consciousness was drowning in agony. My mind was a ringing void, filled with nothing but the bone-deep pain and the sounds that destroyed all my hopes. When the 10th finger was crushed, the pain turned to a dull numbness. I lay on the floor like a heap of torn flesh, only the faint rise and fall of my chest proving I was still alive. My hands were mangled beyond recognition, a bloody pulp. The thick, metallic scent of blood filled the room. That's enough. Ethan's voice finally cut through the haze, as calm as if he were commenting on the weather. Drag her over to Sophia. Make her bow and admit her guilt. The bodyguard dragged me across the floor like a dead dog and dropped me at Sophia's feet. My head was shoved brutally against the hardwood, hitting it with a dull thud. Sophia, are you satisfied now? Ethan's voice was filled with a sickening, feigned tenderness. I lay on the cold floor, my consciousness fading. Before I finally sank into darkness, I heard Sophia's crystal clear, though still tearful, voice. Ethan, you're so good to me. Those words didn't cut my fingers. They annihilated 3 years of my unconditional love for him. Ethan, from this moment on, all that's left between us is a blood debt. The sharp, antiseptic smell of bleach stung my nostrils. I forced my heavy eyelids open. The first thing I saw was the blindingly white ceiling of a hospital room. It was quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of medical equipment. I tried to move, and an excruciating pain in my hands instantly threw me back to that bloody afternoon. I lowered my head and saw them my hands, now encased in huge, ball-like bandages. Dark stains of blood were still seeping through the gauze. You're awake. A weary voice spoke. I turned my head to see a middle-aged doctor in a white coat and gold-rimmed glasses. His eyes held an unconcealed pity. Doctor, my hands. My voice was a raw, sandpaper rasp. The doctor adjusted his glasses, sighed, and spoke with a heavy heart. Mrs. Thorne, please prepare yourself. The phalanges of your fingers have suffered comminuted fractures. The nerves are completely destroyed. We've done everything we can clean the wounds, set what we could, but... He paused, choosing his words carefully. It will be impossible to restore their previous function. In the future, you will find it difficult not only to perform delicate surgical procedures, but even to hold a glass of water. The rest of his words faded into a dull roar. One phrase echoed in my mind. Completely destroyed. For Ethan, I had given up a brilliant future as a leading physicist and immersed myself in the field of medicine, a field I never cared for. For 3 years, I had spent my days and nights in locked labs, practicing nerve microsurgery on animal subjects. I had turned my hands into the most precise and steady surgical instruments in the country. All of it was to defuse the time bomb ticking in his head. And now, these hands, into which I had poured my entire soul and hope, had been destroyed by him. The irony was suffocating. The door to the room opened, interrupting my thoughts. I thought it might be Ethan, and a pathetic flicker of hope, which I was ready to laugh at myself for, stirred in my heart. Maybe, after calming down, he felt some remorse. But it was his personal assistant, Alex, who walked in. He wore a practiced, professional smile, but his eyes held a hint of condescension. He placed a folder and an envelope on the bedside table. Mrs. Thorne. He faltered, then corrected himself. Miss Vance. Mr. Thorne is currently accompanying Miss Bell to a therapy session. He was unable to come. He asked me to give you this. My heart finally sank into an icy abyss. So, while I was enduring the hellish pain of my shattered fingers, he was gently consoling the true culprit. I didn't look at the documents. My gaze bored into Alex. He grew uneasy under my heavy stare, looked away, and quietly explained. It's the divorce agreement. Mr. Thorne has already signed it. The envelope contains a cashier's check for $10 million. He said this is compensation for your hands and for 3 years of marriage. He also asked me to convey that you should take the money and leave New York as soon as possible. Don't appear before Miss Bell again and be an eyesore. Compensation for my hands. An eyesore. I stared at the check and suddenly let out a low laugh. I laughed and laughed until tears streamed down my cheeks, hot drops that burned my skin. $10 million. He thought he could buy my hands for that pathetic sum. He would never know that these hands could have brought the Vance Corporation over $500 billion. These hands were his only ticket to life. Fine. Very fine, I hissed through my teeth. Seeing me laugh, Alex seemed to sigh in relief. He spoke stiffly, then please get some rest. I won't disturb you any longer. He practically fled the room, as if afraid my despair was contagious. The room was once again deathly silent. With my mangled hands, I clumsily pulled the divorce agreement and the check toward me. Ethan Thorne's sprawling signature cut into my eyes. The number on the check seemed like the cruelest joke in the world. I couldn't hold it back any longer. I buried my face in the pillow and let out a raw, animalistic howl. All the grief, the rage, and the bone-deep hatred erupted in that single moment. I don't know how long I cried. When the tears ran dry and my throat was raw, I slowly lifted my head. There was no sadness left in my eyes, only a dead calm and an icy resolve. My love had died the moment my bones had cracked. All that remained was vengeance. I propped myself up on my elbows and awkwardly tried to pick up the weightless check with my trembling, disfigured hands. Every movement was a struggle, sending waves of agony through me. I walked to the trash can in the corner of the room, opened my fingers, and the piece of paper, bearing all of Ethan's arrogance and insults, fell silently into the filth. Having done that, I returned to the bed and picked up my phone. Since my fingers couldn't bend, I had to use my knuckles, repeatedly and painfully tapping the screen to find an encrypted number pinned at the very top of my contacts. A number I hadn't called in 3 long years. The call was answered on the first ring. Katie? A voice, authoritative but aged, came through the line. It was tinged with a barely perceptible tremor of excitement and anxiety. Hearing that voice, all my carefully constructed composure crumbled. Uncontrollable sobs broke through my voice. Grandfather. My girl. They hurt you. The old man's voice on the other end, my grandfather, Edward Vance, head of the formidable Vance Corporation, was laced with pain. I told you that punk from the Thorne family wasn't worthy of you, but you wouldn't listen. Grandfather, I was wrong. I closed my eyes as a single, pure tear traced a path down my cheek. I shouldn't have disgraced you and the entire Vance family for some man. What matters is that you're coming back. Just come back. Edward Vance's voice softened. As long as you're with us, the Vance family will always have your back. I took a deep, shuddering breath, wiping away my tears. My voice was steady and hard when I spoke again. Grandfather, I'm coming home. And I want their entire family to pay for my hands with their lives. There was a moment of silence on the other end, then Edward Vance's voice, now hard as steel, replied, Good. Grandfather has been waiting to hear those words for 3 years. Katie, don't worry. Anyone who dared to hurt you will pay the Vance family back 100-fold. After hanging up, I stared out at the gray New York sky. My gaze was as cold as frost. Ethan. Sophia. Your game is over. Now, it's my turn. The next morning, as I finished my discharge paperwork and walked out of the hospital, my body racked with exhaustion, an endless procession of black Cadillac Escalades was silently lined up at the entrance. Beside each car stood a bodyguard in a black suit and white gloves. Their severe expressions and powerful presence made passers-by turn and stare, but no one dared to approach. A silver-haired butler with an impeccable posture strode toward me and bowed deeply. His voice was respectful and clear. Welcome home, Miss Vance. The dozens of bodyguards behind him bowed in perfect unison, their voices thundering across the street. Welcome back, Miss Vance. For 3 years, I had grown accustomed to being the meek, invisible Thorne daughter-in-law, used to haggling at farmers' markets and riding the crowded subway. This scene, worthy of a blockbuster film, made my head spin for a second. But I quickly regained the cool, imperious composure befitting the heiress of the Boston-based Vance family. Charles, thank you for your trouble. I gave a slight nod. It is no trouble, ma'am. It is my greatest honor to welcome you. Charles's eyes were slightly red. He glanced cautiously at my bandaged hands, a mixture of pain and fury in his gaze. But he said nothing more, only opening the door of the extended Escalade at the center of the motorcade. The car pulled away smoothly, leaving behind the city where I had suffered my humiliation, and headed toward a heavily guarded estate in nearby Connecticut. It was a secret Vance compound. The lavish cityscapes of New York blurred past the window, disappearing behind me like the foolish marriage I was leaving in the past. An hour later, the motorcade entered the estate. There was no opulent decor, only sleek, white buildings that hummed with an air of futuristic technology. A faint medicinal scent hung in the air. This was the main biotechnology lab of the Vance Corporation. A helicopter was already waiting on the helipad. Without a moment's delay, I boarded the private jet bound for Boston, for the Vance family's main residence. When I set foot on my home turf again, I was met by a group of gray-haired experts. They were the pillars of the corporation's medical team, my mentors who had watched me grow up. Miss Vance. Dr. Albright, the head of the team, couldn't hold back his tears when he saw my mangled hands. Your hands. It's all right, Dr. Albright. I'm fine. I offered them a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I just need your help to put them back together. They led me deep into the lab, to an ultra-sterile, special-purpose chamber codenamed Nirvana. In the center of the room was a giant glass tank filled with a pale green liquid. Miss Vance, this is the neuroregenerative fluid we developed based on your theoretical research, Dr. Albright began to explain. It stimulates high-speed cell regeneration, mending bone and nerve endings. However, he hesitated. The process is akin to scraping poison from the bone. The level of pain may be 10 times greater than what you experienced when they were broken. I understand. I looked at the tank of fluid calmly, without a trace of fear. The pain of my shattered fingers had already destroyed my perception of suffering. From now on, any pain would only be a catalyst to make me stronger. I undressed and slowly stepped into the glass capsule. As my body became fully submerged in the pale green liquid, an indescribable, monstrous pain shot through my hands. It felt as if billions of ants were gnawing at my bone marrow, as if countless red-hot needles were stitching through my nerves. I couldn't suppress a choked gasp of agony. My forehead was instantly beaded with cold sweat. I bit down hard on my lip to keep from making another sound, and blood trickled from the corners of my mouth, staining the green fluid red. Through the glass, I could see my grandfather and Dr. Albright watching me, their hearts breaking. I closed my eyes, and the image of Ethan's cold face and Sophia's victorious smirk flashed in my mind. What is this pain? Compared to the humiliation and betrayal they gave me, this is nothing. I swore to myself, the day my hands are healed, will be the day the Thorne family is annihilated. For the next few weeks, I spent nearly all my time in the Nirvana chamber, submerged in the fluid for 20 hours a day. Every fusion of bone and regeneration of nerve made me wish for death. But while my body endured the limits of torment, my mind remained clearer than ever. Through a secure communication channel, I began to remotely direct the Vance business empire. Charles, I need all of the Thorne Enterprises commercial documents, especially the details of their medical equipment supply chains. And start a rumor. Say that the mysterious surgeon known only as Dr. N, for unknown, has been traveling incognito lately, but seems to have taken a great interest in complex brain tumor cases in the United States. Also, have several exclusive business suits from Tom Ford tailored for me, and a pair of custom-made black velvet gloves. I'll be attending the International Business Forum in New York next week as the heiress of the Vance family. To the outside world, I was still the pathetic, discarded wife of the Thornes with ruined hands. But only I knew that beneath those black gloves, a new, stronger, and steadier pair of godlike hands was being forged from the ashes. Meanwhile, in New York, in the CEO's office of Thorne Enterprises, Ethan was suddenly struck by a blinding headache. The world spun, his vision went dark, and he collapsed heavily to the floor. After being rushed to the hospital, the top neurosurgeons in New York held an emergency consultation. Mr. Thorne, the situation is critical, the attending physician said grimly, holding up the MRI scans to a barely conscious Ethan. The tumor in your brain has begun to advance. It's severely compressing your optic and motor nerves. Surgery must be performed within 2 weeks, or the consequences will be fatal. Ethan's face went deathly pale. What's the success rate? Given the current technology. The doctor shook his head. Less than 5%. The complexity of this operation is beyond the scope of modern medicine. Ethan's heart sank into a black hole. Just then, a visiting professor from Johns Hopkins intervened. Perhaps there is one last hope. All eyes turned to him. I've heard that in exclusive medical circles, there exists a mysterious, brilliant surgeon who goes by the pseudonym Dr. N. They say his microsurgery skills are godlike. He takes on the incurable cases that we are powerless against. If we can find him, Mr. Thorne might have a chance. Dr. N. A flicker of hope ignited in Ethan's eyes. Where is he? Unknown, the professor said with regret. Dr. N's movements are always kept secret. He never shows his face. But rumor has it he's somewhere in New York right now. Ethan immediately gave an order to his assistant, Alex. At any cost, use all our resources, but find me this Dr. N. He thought this was the beginning of his salvation. He would never know that the lifeline he was so desperately grasping for was the very woman whose hands he had personally crushed, whose dignity he had insulted with a check, and whom he had cast out of New York. And at that very moment, I, wearing the black velvet gloves that concealed all my secrets, was slowly descending the steps of a private jet, in my new capacity as the heiress of the Vance family. Ethan, I'm back. This time, we're playing for keeps. The International Economic Forum in New York was a glittering affair, a gathering of the world's elite. The clinking of champagne glasses mingled with hushed conversations. This was the hunting ground of power and capital, where behind every smile lay a billion-dollar deal or a ruthless corporate intrigue. I wore a severe white suit by Tom Ford. My long hair was swept up in a flawless chignon, my makeup perfect but cold. The only thing that broke the immaculate image was the pair of black velvet gloves that fit my hands snugly, from fingertips to wrists. These gloves were not just my disguise, they were the brand of my hatred. Look, isn't that the heiress of the Vance family from Boston? I heard she cut ties with her family 3 years ago over some man. Why is she suddenly back? Quiet. I heard that man abused her and crippled her hands. That's why she's wearing gloves, to hide the disfigurement. Really? What a shame, with such a beautiful face. The whispers around me were low, but clear enough for me to hear. I paid them no mind. Holding a glass of champagne, I surveyed the room with a cool gaze, like a queen observing her domain. Soon, my eyes locked onto a familiar silhouette. Ethan. He looked much worse than he had a few weeks ago. The dark circles under his eyes were impossible to hide, but he was still dressed in a perfect suit, chatting with several financial magnates. The search for Dr. N had clearly taken its toll. He felt my gaze and turned. When our eyes met, I clearly saw a flash of admiration in his, which was quickly replaced by profound shock and disbelief. He probably couldn't imagine that the timid, makeup-free housewife he had discarded could, by simply changing her armor, outshine everyone in the room. Sophia, standing beside him, recognized me too. Like a frightened rabbit, she instinctively clung to Ethan's arm, her eyes filled with hostility and envy. I ignored them and walked directly toward the forum's organizer, the oligarch Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, it's been too long. You look as robust as ever, I greeted him with a smile. The oligarch's face lit up. Oh, can it be? Little Katie Vance. You're finally back. Your grandfather was just telling me all about you the other day. We exchanged a few more pleasantries. My casual elegance and aristocratic bearing silenced everyone who had just been whispering about me. They finally understood that no matter what I had been through, I was still, by blood, the princess of the Boston Vances. Ethan's face grew darker by the second. He clearly hadn't expected the trash he'd thrown out to be chatting so effortlessly with one of the most powerful men in the country. After a moment of hesitation, he led Sophia toward me, glass in hand. Catherine. I didn't expect to see you here. Ethan's tone was strained, his complex gaze darting between my face and my gloved hands. I didn't even look him in the eye, merely offering a curt, formal greeting before turning back to my conversation with Sterling, leaving him standing there like a fool. Ethan's pride was clearly wounded. His face clouded over. Just then, Sophia, standing beside him, let out a small cry. Oops. The glass of red wine in her hand tilted, and the dark liquid arced through the air, aimed directly at my white suit, specifically at my gloved hands. Her plan was obvious. If the wine hit my gloves, I would have to publicly remove them to clean myself, revealing my hideously scarred hands to everyone and covering me in permanent disgrace. What a petty, malicious little trick. But she had sorely underestimated me. A split second before the wine could touch me, my gloved right hand moved with a speed the eye could barely follow. I gave a slight twist of my wrist, a fluid flick of my hand, and leaned my body back just so. The glass of red wine sailed past my suit by a millimeter, and every single drop splashed onto Sophia's own expensive white dress. Ah! Sophia shrieked, staring in horror at the massive red stain blooming across her chest. The attention of the entire room instantly snapped to us. What happened? It looks like Miss Bell spilled wine on herself. And Miss Vance's reflexes are lightning fast. Sophia's face alternated between red and white. In a fit of rage and shame, she pointed a finger at me and shrieked, Catherine Vance, it was you. You pushed me on purpose. Before I could even open my mouth, Ethan stepped forward, shielding Sophia with his body, and barked at me, Catherine, isn't it enough? Sophia has been through enough. Why do you constantly try to harm her? Seeing him blindly defending his true love, I found it laughable. I didn't even bother to argue. I slowly raised my gloved right hand, admiring it under the light of the chandeliers, and said with a cold, mocking tone, "Mr. Thorne, accusations require proof. Besides, my hands are priceless. If they had been harmed because of your Sophia, could you have afforded the damages?" My hands were still in the process of regeneration. Sharp pains still shot through the nerves. They were, indeed, priceless. But to Ethan, my words sounded like an absurd joke. He laughed openly, not bothering to hide his contempt. "Crippled hands that can't even hold a glass, you call priceless? Catherine, it seems that leaving my house has made you lose your mind." He thought those words would wound me, make me lose my composure. He was wrong. Not only did I not get angry, I slowly stretched my lips into a mysterious smile. I took a step forward, leaned close to his ear, and whispered, so low that only he could hear, "Mr. Thorne, I forgot to tell you. The doctor, you're so desperately searching for. He hates it, more than anything, when someone touches his things or hurts his people. How do you think he'd feel if he learned that you publicly insulted my crippled hands today, for the sake of another woman? Do you think he would still want to take on your surgery?" As soon as he heard the name Dr. N, Ethan's body went rigid. He whipped his head around, his eyes locking onto mine with a look of shock, doubt, and a dawning, unacknowledged fear. Ethan's pupils constricted violently. He grabbed my wrist, his grip so tight I thought the bone might shatter. His eyes, which moments ago had been filled with scorn, were now wild with alarm. How do you know about Dr. N? His voice was a low hiss, laced with a tremor he couldn't control. I slowly, finger by finger, pried his hand off my wrist. The movement was graceful, as if I were brushing away dirt. The cool touch of my velvet-gloved fingers made him instinctively loosen his grip. "How do I know?" "That's none of your business, Mr. Thorne." I took a step back, re-establishing a safe distance. My smile grew colder. "You only need to know that, Dr. N is a friend of mine. And he has a very short temper." Ethan's face went chalk white. Like a drowning man grasping at a straw, he asked, his voice desperate, "Where is he? Are you close? Can you help me contact him?" "Help you?" I laughed as if he'd told a joke. "Mr. Thorne, have you forgotten? We're divorced. Why on earth would I help you?" My words hit him like a bucket of ice water. The color drained from his face. His lips trembled, but he couldn't form a single word. Yes, we were divorced. The Catherine, who had obeyed his every command and endured all his whims, was dead. Catherine. He struggled to correct his tone, his voice dropping to an almost pleading level. "If you help me, I'll agree to any condition. Anything." I raised an eyebrow, my gaze sliding past him to the woman behind him, her face contorted with jealousy. "All right. My condition is very simple. Make this Sophia Bell disappear from my sight forever." Hearing this, Sophia's face fell. She rushed to Ethan's side, clinging to his sleeve, her eyes filling with tears. "Ethan, don't listen to her. She's just trying to get revenge on me, to break us up." "What, Dr. N? She's probably making it all up to fool you." A flicker of doubt crossed Ethan's eyes. The existence of Dr. N was ethereal, but my hatred for Sophia was a hard fact. Seeing his hesitation, I lost what little patience I had left. "It seems Mr. Thorne hasn't decided what's more important, his own life or his beloved." I turned away. "In that case, goodbye." I walked toward the other end of the hall without a backward glance. I knew he would make a choice. Because my grandfather, Edward Vance, had already used all the family's resources to create a medical blockade around him in the U.S. Besides the ghost of a chance in Dr. N, he had no other options. As I expected, the next morning, my assistant called. "Miss Vance, Ethan Thorne has been waiting in the lobby of the Vance Corporation for an hour. Let him wait." I was in the lab, engaged in delicate motor skills training, carving letters onto a single grain of rice with surgical tweezers. My hands were recovering beautifully. I could already perform the most intricate movements. I made Ethan wait the entire morning. Only around noon did I leisurely take the private elevator down to the lobby. He was there. The same Ethan Thorne who once dictated terms to the entire New York business world now stood in a corner of the lobby like a tormented prisoner awaiting his sentence. The capillaries in his eyes had burst. His whole demeanor screamed anxiety and despair. When he saw me, he rushed forward. "Catherine," his voice was hoarse. I stopped and looked at him with indifference. "Does Mr. Thorne have business with me?" "I've already sent Sophia to a remote town in the Rust Belt." He enunciated each word, staring me straight in the eyes. Without my permission, she will never return to New York. Now, can you help me contact Dr. N? I chuckled internally. Send her to the Rust Belt, how poetic. Just temporarily hiding his precious treasure. But it didn't matter to me. The pawn named Sophia would be useful later. Mr. Thorne, you are quite decisive. I feigned a nod of approval, then my tone changed. But contacting Dr. N isn't so simple. He travels constantly, and his fees are astronomical. Money is not an issue, Ethan blurted out, afraid I would change my mind. Excellent. I raised my gloved right hand and elegantly flicked away a non-existent speck of dust. In that case, as a welcome gift for Dr. N, you can transfer 5% of the shares of your massive Hudson Yards South Tower project. What? Ethan's face twisted. 5%? Catherine, why don't you just rob me? The Hudson Yards South Tower was the crown jewel of Thorne Enterprises for the next decade. Its value was astronomical. 5% was equivalent to nearly a tenth of the company's entire liquid assets. I smiled, but my smile was chilling. Mr. Thorne, you don't seem to understand the situation. You are begging me, not the other way around. The line of people hoping for an appointment with my friend Dr. N stretches from here to California. He might not even glance at your 5%. Watching his face turn purple, I raised the stakes. I'll give you 3 days to consider. After 3 days, Dr. N might lose interest. After all, he hates having his time wasted. With that, I ignored him and headed to the restaurant. I knew he would agree. In those 3 days, the tumor in his brain would act up again. The fear of death, like a venomous snake, would tighten its grip around his throat until it forced him to bow his head. In this game of cat and mouse, I was destined to win from the very beginning. Ethan, this is just the beginning. I will peel you like an onion. Your wealth, your dignity, everything you have. And then, I will take your life. For the next 3 days, I paid no attention to Ethan. I completely immersed myself in my recovery training. Late at night, the secret Vance labs were brightly lit. I stood before a sterile table, and slowly pulled off my black velvet gloves under the shadowless lamps. For the first time, my hands were fully exposed to the light. After almost a month in the Nirvana capsule and intensive rehabilitation, the hands that were once a bloody mess had transformed beyond recognition. The skin was smooth and delicate again, though a few faint pink scars remained. It was impossible to believe these hands had endured such a brutal trauma. I tried to move my fingers. They were long, with well-defined joints. Every movement was fluid and full of strength. Miss Vance, nerve conduction velocity has recovered to 85% of your peak condition. Muscle strength is at 90%, Professor Albright announced, his voice trembling with excitement as he looked at the monitors. This is nothing short of a miracle in modern medicine. I didn't reply. I just picked up a sharp scalpel. The familiar cold touch of the handle was so comforting it almost brought me to tears. Taking a deep breath, I focused my gaze. On the operating table lay a single, translucent grape. My wrist flickered. The scalpel left a silver arc in the air. The tip of the blade gently, with surgical precision, incised the thinnest layer of the grape's skin without damaging a single micron of the pulp beneath. Using forceps, I completely peeled the skin off, and then, using a suture thinner than a human hair, I stitched it back on. The entire process was seamless, without the slightest hesitation or tremor. When the final stitch was in place, the grape looked as good as new, save for the gossamer thin seam on its surface. Success! A chorus of hushed cheers erupted in the lab. I exhaled in relief and put down the scalpel, a fine sheen of sweat on my forehead. Though it was the simplest of tests, for me, it was proof of my rebirth. These hands had not only returned, they were steadier, faster, and stronger than before. At that moment, my secure phone rang. It was Charles. Miss Vance, the powerful tech mogul from Silicon Valley, Julian Croft, has suffered an acute cerebral hemorrhage. The situation is critical. His private jet has already landed in Boston. They are demanding that Dr. N, and only Dr. N, perform the surgery. A predatory glint flashed in my eyes. Someone handed me a pillow, just as I was getting sleepy. Ethan was doubting the reality of Dr. N, was he? Well, let him see with his own eyes what this surgeon is capable of. Tell them Dr. N agrees, I said, putting on a surgical mask and cap, leaving only my cold eyes visible. The operation will take place at the Vance Central Clinical Hospital in New York. And have someone accidentally leaked to the New York press that Ethan Thorne has been desperately searching for a doctor for 3 days, and that his condition is worsening. 2 hours later, a massive rescue operation unfolded in New York, stunning the entire country. The tech mogul security detail blocked the entire route from the airport to the Vance clinic. Hordes of reporters swarmed the area, their camera flashes illuminating the night sky. Everyone wanted to know who this mysterious Dr. N was, who could make one of the most powerful men in Silicon Valley fly across the country for a life-saving procedure. Dressed in a green sterile surgical gown and my signature black gloves, I entered the operating room surrounded by a tight ring of security. I ignored the frenzied reporters, but out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a familiar, desperate face in the crowd. It was Ethan. He, too, had been pushed back behind the cordon. He was ashen, watching me at the center of this entourage. Though he didn't know it was me under the mask, seeing the grand display that symbolized the highest medical authority, his eyes betrayed a complex mix of emotions. Shock, envy, but above all, the raw desire for life of a dying man. He was probably wishing he was the one on that operating table. I looked away, a silent, cold smirk playing on my lips. Ethan, be patient. Watch closely. Feel what it's like to be unable to live and unable to die. The surgery lasted 8 long hours. The location of Croft's aneurysm was extremely dangerous. The slightest mistake would have led to a massive hemorrhage. But under my reborn hands, every danger was masterfully navigated. Dissection, ligation, removal, each movement was a textbook example of perfection. When the indicator above the operating room switched from red to green and I announced the successful completion of the surgery, the Silicon Valley mogul's entourage burst into tears of joy. They bowed low to me, calling me an angel sent by God himself. The news spread like wildfire, reaching every major city within half an hour. The name Dr. N was in the headlines of every major American media outlet overnight. His mystique, his power, his omnipotence became the talk of the nation. And I, at the center of this hurricane, quietly left the hospital and returned to the lab. Removing my gloves, I looked at my hands, slightly tired after the intense work. There was no joy in my eyes, only an icy chill. Saving the mogul was just a way to build my legend and exert even more pressure on Ethan. The true purpose of these hands was to deliver judgment. The next day, following the news of Ethan's grave illness and his fruitless search for treatment, the stock of Thorne Enterprises plummeted. And Ethan himself, having witnessed the limitless power of Dr. N, finally cast aside his pathetic pride. He came to the Vance Corporation headquarters again. This time, he didn't demand an appointment or try to force his way in. He just stood there, from early morning until dusk, like a stone statue. Only when I finished my work did he approach me, dragging his feet. I agree, he said, looking at me with bloodshot eyes. His voice was raspy, almost unrecognizable. 5% of the Hudson Yards project is yours. Just, I beg you, connect me with Dr. N. He was completely broken. I looked at his pathetic state without a shred of pity. Too late, I said, walking past him, tossing out just 2 icy words. Now I want 10%. Ethan flinched. He turned in disbelief and stared at my back. What did you say? 10%. Catherine, don't push it. His voice was filled with suppressed rage, like a cornered animal. Thorne Enterprises was his life's work. 10% would seriously undermine his power on the board. I stopped, but didn't turn around. Mr. Thorne, you need to understand. It's your life on the line, not mine. My voice was calm, but every word hit its mark. Dr. N saved a tech titan and became a national sensation. The people trying to get to him now will offer far more. 10% is just for the sake of our past family ties. I pronounced the word ties with a special, mocking emphasis. Ethan's breathing grew ragged. He clenched his fists, the veins on the back of his hands bulging. I knew his sanity was hanging by a thread. If it weren't for the sword of Damocles hanging over his head, he would have lunged and strangled me. I slowly turned, meeting his blazing eyes, and offered an alternative with a smile. You can refuse. After all, you're not the only Thorne heir. I hear your cousin Victor, who studied abroad, has been very active lately. That remark hit his most vulnerable spot. The infighting in the Thorne family had always been brutal. Victor had long dreamed of taking his place. If the rumors of Ethan's illness were confirmed, Victor would immediately seize power. Then Ethan would lose not only his life but also his empire. Of 2 evils, one chooses the lesser. Ethan stared at me, his face a mask of agonizing conflict. The air between us seemed to freeze. After a long moment, he ground out through clenched teeth, "Fine. I'll give it." He sounded as if all the strength had been drained from him, his shoulders slumping. I smiled in satisfaction. I knew that from the moment he agreed, the fall of Thorne Enterprises was just a matter of time. Over the next few days, Ethan transferred the shares with astonishing speed. When I received the hefty contract, I felt no joy, only a cold indifference. "Now will you give me Dr. N's contact information?" Ethan asked impatiently, afraid I'd back out. "Not so fast." I handed the documents to my assistant and pulled a small Rubik's Cube from my purse. My gloved fingers began to twist it with lightning speed. It was my new method for training finger dexterity. "Dr. N is busy with new research and is not seeing visitors." I continued to manipulate the puzzle, adding casually, "But he asked me to pass something on to you." Ethan immediately tensed. "What?" "He said your case is very interesting to him. But he has a rule." I stopped fiddling with the cube and looked up at Ethan. "He never saves those whose minds are evil and whose hands are stained with blood." Ethan's face went instantly ashen. He remembered Sophia, whose hands had been broken on his order. He knows everything?" "There is nothing Dr. N can't find out if he wants to," I replied coldly. "So, Mr. Thorne, before you ask for surgery, shouldn't you wash the blood from your hands?" I was forcing him to deal with Sophia, forcing him to pay for his crime. Ethan understood my implication. His face flushed with rage, he turned and left without a word. I knew he would do it. To save his own life, he was capable of anything. However, sometimes plans change. The day after his visit, I was in my office, performing the final stage of my hand rehabilitation. To achieve the best results, I had taken off my gloves and was solving a complex 12x12x12x12 Rubik's Cube at a dizzying speed. My fingers danced over the colored squares like they were performing a rapid sonata. Suddenly, the office door flew open without a knock. It was Ethan. Why had he burst in so unexpectedly? My heart leaped into my throat. Before I could even think, acting on pure reflex, I swept the Rubik's Cube into an open desk drawer. A split second before his eyes fell on me, I slammed the drawer shut with my other hand. Having done that, I instantly put on a mask of pain. I raised my right hand, which had just been moving at incredible speed, and forced it to tremble violently and unnaturally, as if in a neuralgic fit. I let out a stifled groan, and a cold sweat conveniently broke out on my forehead. Ethan's footsteps halted at my desk. His gaze fell on my hand, trembling in agony, and a complex emotion flickered in his eyes. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, frowning, a note of concern in his voice that he himself didn't seem to recognize. "Nothing," I squeezed out through clenched teeth. "Old wounds. The severed nerves, they hurt all the time." My acting was flawless. Ethan looked at my face, pale with pain, at the hand shaking like an autumn leaf. The suspicion in his eyes finally dissipated, replaced by a strange expression that mixed satisfaction with guilt. Satisfaction that I was indeed a cripple and no threat, and guilt that he was the one who had destroyed my hands. "It seems your hands really are useless," he concluded with an inexplicable sense of relief. I sneered internally but kept a pained expression on my face. "Did Mr. Thorne burst in here just to see how pathetically this cripple is living?" I quipped. Ethan choked, his face twisting. He looked away and pulled a folder from his briefcase. "I've already dealt with Sophia. She was sentenced to 10 years for aggravated assault and corporate espionage. Here's the court verdict." He paused, then added, "And her hands. They were broken in prison by other inmates." I remained silent, watching him. "And now?" He took a deep breath, looking at me almost pleadingly. "Now, will you arrange a meeting with Dr. N for me?" He had dropped all caution, completely convinced that I posed no threat and was his only hope. Seeing his pathetic, begging state, I slowly hid my trembling hand under the desk. Out of sight, with my crippled hands, I silently and expertly finished solving the 12x12x12 Rubik's Cube. "Ethan, you will never know that at the moment you were celebrating your safety, you had already walked into my deadliest trap. Your vaunted intellect has become a toy in my hands." "Dr. N has not been in a good mood lately," I said, not even glancing at the verdict he held out, just pushing it aside. Ethan's face darkened. Suppressing his anger, he snapped, "Catherine, I did everything you asked. What more do you want?" "Sophia got what she deserved. What are you not satisfied with?" "I'm not satisfied." I looked up, meeting his eyes, and laughed a cold, lifeless laugh. "Mr. Thorne, did you misunderstand something? Sophia harmed me, not Dr. N. The fact that you sent her to prison is merely compensation for your sin against me. What does that have to do with whether the doctor will see you?" Ethan was speechless. Only now did he realize that I had been leading him by the nose from the very beginning. The initiative had always been in my hands. "So what do you want for him to agree?" He ground out through his teeth. "Very simple. I stood up and walked to the panoramic window, looking out at the bustling New York streets. Sunlight streamed over me but couldn't melt the ice in my eyes. I want Sophia to experience the exact same thing I did. I turned around slowly. I want you to personally break all 10 of her fingers. You're insane. Ethan screamed, a mixture of shock and fury on his face. She's already been sentenced to 10 years. What more do you need, Catherine? How can you be so cruel? Cruel? I laughed as if I'd heard the best joke in the world. Ethan, when you ordered my fingers to be broken, you didn't think you were being cruel. When you abandoned me in the hospital to save her, where was your mercy? My voice grew louder, each word a shard of ice driving into his heart. I'll tell you what this is. This isn't cruelty. This is an eye for an eye. My gaze cut into him like a knife. Dr. N believes in karma. Sophia will reap what she has sown. And you, as her accomplice, must personally complete the circle. Otherwise, Dr. N would never save a man whose hands are dripping with filthy blood. I pinned all my sadistic demands on the fictional surgeon. I wanted Ethan to know that every humiliation he suffered now was payback for his past stupidity and brutality. Ethan's chest heaved. He was fighting an internal war. On one side, his life. On the other, the woman he had sworn to protect. I'll give you 24 hours to think about it. I delivered my ultimatum. Tomorrow, at this time, I want to see the result in the visiting room of the Rikers Island jail. Time is running out. I pressed the intercom and told my assistant to show the guest out. Ethan left like a man who had lost his soul. I knew he would do it. His headaches were becoming more frequent. His vision was starting to blur. Death was breathing down his neck, and nothing was more important than his own life. The next day, I arrived at the correctional facility. The thick, bulletproof glass in the visiting room divided the world in two. I sat relaxed on a small sofa, sipping expensive black tea. Soon, they brought in Ethan and Sophia, who was dressed in a prison jumpsuit. Her hands were bound in heavy cuffs. Sophia was gaunt. Without makeup, her face was a sickly yellow. When she saw me, her eyes filled with venom. Catherine, you bitch. How dare you come here? She lunged at the glass, but the clanking cuffs pulled her back. I didn't react, shifting my gaze to Ethan. He was paler than a ghost. He approached Sophia with a complex expression. There was guilt, pity, but most of all, the cold calculation of survival. Ethan, what are you going to do? Sophia's voice trembled. She sensed something was wrong. Ethan said nothing. He nodded to the guard. The guard uncuffed Sophia and pinned her hands firmly to the table. No, Ethan, you can't do this to me. It's me, you're Sophia. Sophia understood. She began to struggle madly, letting out piercing screams. Ethan closed his eyes, as if it pained him to watch, but he forced himself to take a small iron hammer from the guard's hand. Catherine, I'll haunt you even in the afterlife. Sophia cursed me in despair. I lifted my teacup, blew gently on the surface, and a ruthless smile touched my lips. Through the thick glass, I watched as Ethan raised the hammer and brought it down with all his might. Ah! Sophia's scream tore through the glass. It was blood-curdling. But Ethan didn't stop. 1, 2, 3. Each blow was accompanied by the dull crunch of bone and Sophia's weakening cries. Blood spattered his face. The same hands that signed multi-million-dollar contracts were now, in a primal, barbaric fashion, destroying another person's hands. And I just watched. The scene was so similar to that fateful day. Only now, the torturer and the victim had switched places. When her 10th finger was crushed, Sophia had already passed out from the shock and slumped in her chair like a rag doll. Ethan dropped the hammer and leaned against the wall, panting, as if all the life had been squeezed out of him. He looked up and met my eyes through the glass, his own bloodshot. Are you satisfied now? He asked hoarsely, his voice filled with despair. I set down my cup, walked to the glass, and looking at his pathetic state and trembling, bloody hands, I smiled slowly. I leaned into the microphone and said, Mr. Thorne, this is just the interest. The real show is yet to come. I turned and left that place of blood and despair. Ethan, you just rang the death knell for your beloved. Now, it's your turn. After Ethan dealt with Sophia, he came running to me almost immediately, demanding I fulfill my promise. His mental state was on the verge of collapse. The fear of death and the guilt of crippling the woman he loved were eating him alive day and night. I did everything you said. He stood in my office, his eyes red, radiating a sense of utter decay. Where is Dr. N? When will he see me? Don't be hasty, Mr. Thorne. I motioned for my assistant to pour him some coffee while I leisurely flipped through some documents. Dr. N is satisfied with your sincerity. However, before such a complex brain surgery, he needs to conduct a full assessment of your health and the solvency of Thorn Enterprises. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? It means, I looked up and smiled, but my words were poisoned blades, that Dr. N needs to be sure the holding company has stable funds to pay his astronomical fee, and for your rehabilitation. No one wants a patient to go bankrupt mid-operation, right? Of course, it was a lie. My goal, under the pretext of an audit, was to legally embed my team into the heart of his corporation to prepare the ground for a complete takeover. Ethan suspected something, but he had no leverage to negotiate. The mysterious doctor was his only hope. Fine, he ground out. I agree. I'll tell my CFO to give you access. Not just the CFO. I wagged a finger, my smile widening. The doctor needs the full picture. Marketing, operations, the legal department, all key departments must be open to my people. Ethan's face turned to stone. This wasn't an audit, it was a corporate striptease, handing me the very pulse of his company. Catherine, you're taking advantage of me, he growled. You can refuse, I said, leaning back in my chair and looking at him relaxedly. But then Dr. N might think it's not worth his time to treat such an uncooperative patient. Ethan surrendered. The next day, my elite audit team from the Vance Corporation triumphantly marched into the offices of Thorn Enterprises. Ethan thought it was a simple formality. He was wrong. My team began to scrutinize every penny from the last 10 years. Mr. Thorn, why does this overseas investment risk report have the lowest rating? Projects like this should never be approved. Mr. Thorn, this contract with a construction group is 30% above market rate. Please explain your relationship. Mr. Thorn, we found serious tax loopholes. If the IRS sees this, you're facing a colossal fine. Reports that could destroy his empire landed on Ethan's desk one after another. He realized, with horror, that under his iron-fisted rule, the company had long been rotting from the inside, and my people were now unearthing these time bombs one by one. Ethan was consumed by putting out fires while his illness progressed. Vicious headaches, memory lapses, speech problems. He was a string stretched to its breaking point. And I, like a patient hunter, watched as the prey walked right into my trap. In parallel, I used my 10% stake to rally the smaller shareholders who were dissatisfied with Ethan. Everything was going according to plan. A month later, my team presented a final report, hundreds of pages long. Ethan held it with trembling hands. The conclusion was devastating. Due to chaos, bad investments, and legal risks, Thorn Enterprises was on the verge of bankruptcy. This is impossible, he cried, unable to believe his business empire was a house of cards. The facts speak for themselves. I sat opposite him, my voice flat and emotionless. If you don't find a massive sum for a bailout, the holding company won't survive the quarter. Ethan collapsed into his chair, his eyes vacant. But then I changed my tone, feigning the part of a merciful savior. Dr. N sees potential in the holding company's new technology sector. The Vance Corporation is willing to extend a helping hand. A flicker of hope ignited in Ethan's eyes. You'll help me? Of course. I produced another document. This is an investment agreement. We will buy 41% of the shares at market value, becoming the majority shareholders. In return, we will save the company, and the surgeon will immediately schedule your operation. Ethan's expression changed every second. He understood that by signing, he would lose his company. He would go from dictator to my puppet. It was blatant robbery. But did he have a choice? If he didn't sign, he would die, and the company with him. If he signed, he had a chance to live. I'll sign, he finally squeezed out. Watching him put his signature on the paper, I smirked. Ethan, you think you bought a chance at life? No. You bought a ticket to an even deeper level of hell. After signing that contract, selling his soul, it was as if all life had been drained from Ethan. His pride, his empire, it all transferred to the Vances overnight. The corporation's money flowed in, stabilizing the stock. I kept my promise and told him the surgery was scheduled in a month. I needed that month to completely gut his company. As the majority shareholder, I joined the board and conducted a massive purge. All of Ethan's loyalists, the ones who had once looked down on me, were fired. Their positions were filled by the best managers from the Vance Corporation. Ethan watched as his power was stripped away, helpless to do anything. He became a figurehead chairman. Every decision required my signature as CEO. More than once, he burst into my office, screaming, "Catherine, what are you doing? This company bears the Thorn name. Watch your tone, Mr. Thorn." I wouldn't even look up from my papers. The Vance Corporation holds the controlling stake. Legally, this is our company. And you are just an employee. He would tremble with rage, but he had no arguments. If you're not satisfied with my management style, you can resign, I would say, looking at him coldly. But I suppose you'd hate to lose the huge salary you're paid for that nominal title. After all, besides that, you have nothing left. Time and again, he lost to me. He went from a king to a prisoner, dependent on my mood. I enjoyed grinding him into the dirt. One day, I was reviewing a report on Ethan's overseas assets, villas, private helicopters, all the things he'd bought to evade taxes. Soon, they would all be mine. My assistant entered with a strange look on his face. Miss Vance, there's a man here who claims to be Ethan Thorne's cousin. Victor Thorne. He wants to see you. Victor. I smirked. The fish had taken the bait. Let him in. A young man entered, bearing some resemblance to Ethan, but with softer, craftier features. He broke into a wide smile. Miss Vance, I've heard so much about you. I'm Victor Thorne. Have a seat. I gestured to the sofa. Victor got straight to the point. I won't beat around the bush. I know you bought the holding company to get revenge on my blind fool of a cousin. I raised a questioning eyebrow. A flash of ambition lit his eyes. I've always wanted to take his place as the head of the family. We have a common enemy. I think we can cooperate. Cooperate? Why would I need to do that? I'm already in charge. No, no, no. Victor wagged a finger. You own the controlling stake, but you're an outsider. The old guard on the board and in the Thorne family are silent, but they don't accept you. As long as Ethan is alive, he's their banner. But if he dies, and I take over as head of the family with your support, then both the family and the holding company will truly be yours. Isn't that mutually beneficial? What a clever, disgusting man. Willing to sell his cousin's life for power. I liked it. And what's the plan? I asked. Very simple. In a month, during the surgery, your doctor will just have an accidental death on the table. I'll take care of the aftermath so no suspicion falls on you or the clinic. He thought Dr. N was real, and I was just an intermediary. Perfect. Sounds plausible, I said, pretending to think. But why should I trust you? This is why. Victor produced a flash drive and a stack of documents. This is proof of all of Ethan's dirty dealings. Bribes, market manipulation, hostile takeovers. Any one of these is enough to put him away for life. I flipped through the documents, smirking. There isn't a single decent man in the Thorne family. Excellent. I'll pass this on to the clinic's management. Whether they agree or not will depend on your performance. Victor left, satisfied, thinking he had found a powerful ally and would soon be stepping over his cousin's corpse. But he didn't know he was just another pawn on my board. I immediately sent my lawyers to leak this compromising material to the SEC and the DA's office. The net around Ethan was beginning to tighten. Your death is near, Ethan. But just when I thought everything was under control, the unexpected happened. Ethan, beaming and flushed, burst into my office. He slammed a medical report on my desk with a crazed, triumphant look. Catherine, didn't expect this, did you? The heavens haven't abandoned me. He jabbed a finger at the paper. I found someone to replace your charlatan doctor. Academician Alistair Finch from the Stanford Medical Center. A luminary of American neurosurgery. He looked at my scans and said he has a 70% chance of success. My heart skipped a beat. Of course, I knew Dr. Finch. He had been a mentor of mine in the past and was the only one who could even attempt this surgery. But I knew for a fact that 70% was a gross exaggeration. He wouldn't even have 50. How had Ethan contacted him, bypassing the Vance medical blockade? And I remained composed. Congratulations, Mr. Thorne. So, why are you here? To tell you that I no longer answer to you. Ethan's eyes burned with madness. He wanted to unleash all the humiliation of the past few months. You thought you took my company and my life and could do whatever you wanted? You were wrong. He circled the desk, loomed over me, and said menacingly, now it's my turn to set the terms. First, withdraw your complaint against Sophia and get her out of prison. Second, return all my shares. Or else. He smiled a ghastly smile. I will release the recording of your conversation with Victor, about how you planned to have me killed on the operating table. My pupils narrowed. He knew about the deal. Seeing my shock, he laughed even louder. Surprised? Thought I was that simple? That idiot Victor has been under my surveillance for a long time. I have a full audio recording of your conversation. He brandished a small digital recorder. I had to admit, I had underestimated a cornered beast. Now I was faced with a choice. Agree, and my entire scheme would collapse. Refuse, and he would leak the recording. I would be exposed as a snake who planned her husband's murder, which would damage the Vance Corporation's reputation and could land me in prison. Well, Madam CEO? He savored my fear. Shame and prison? Or you give me back everything. I was silent, my head bowed. My shoulders trembled slightly, as if from fear and despair. This only emboldened Ethan. I'll give you 24 hours. He tossed the recorder on the desk. Tomorrow, I expect a new share transfer agreement and an order for Sophia's release. Don't try any tricks, Katie. You can't beat me. He laughed uproariously and stormed out of the office. The moment the door closed, my feigned panic vanished, replaced by a cold, bottomless calm. I picked up the recorder and pressed play. Yes, it was our conversation with Victor. Oh, Ethan. You really think you've won? You think you found a way out and have me by the throat? You're mistaken. All of this was just an appetizer before the main course. Academician Finch? It was me. I had third parties leak that information to you so you would relax and believe in a miracle, and your trump card, Victor, was my gift to you. I knew you were watching him. Every word in that conversation was said specifically for your microphones. I wanted you to think you had me, so that at the moment of your greatest triumph, you would sign the contract that would cast you into the abyss. I opened a desk drawer and took out a document I had prepared long ago. Agreement for full fiduciary asset management and debt transfer. The essence was simple. By signing it, Ethan would transfer all his remaining assets to me as a security deposit for the surgery, and simultaneously, all his personal debts would be moved into this trust fund. It was a true contract for the sale of his soul. After signing, he would go from a billionaire to a destitute bankrupt with massive debts. I picked up the phone and called my assistant. Tell the legal team to get ready. We're signing a new contract with Mr. Thorne tomorrow. Ethan, you think you see light at the end of the tunnel? No. That is the flame of hell, lit in your honor. The next day, I prepared a fake share transfer agreement and a phony release order for Sophia. Ethan strode in, radiating arrogance. Came to your senses, have you? He dropped into the chair with contempt. You've won, Mr. Thorne. I surrender. I pushed the documents toward him, feigning unbearable resentment. He read them carefully, nodded, and signed with relish. Should have done this from the start. He tossed the folder back at me. Remember, never mess with me. I'll remember. I nodded meekly, then, as if just recalling something, I produced another document. Mr. Thorne, one more paper. Your signature is needed. What's this? He frowned. A requirement from Stanford, I explained calmly, reciting my rehearsed story. Due to the strict internal regulations of the medical center, they need financial confirmation as a security deposit. You need to sign this asset and debt management transfer authorization for the duration of your treatment, to prove you can cover any costs and protect the clinic from risk. It sounded plausible. Ethan, intoxicated by his imminent salvation and his victory over me, had lost all caution. Seeing the words academician Finch and deposit, he was almost convinced. They complicate everything, don't they? He grumbled, taking the pen. Eager to get it over with, he was about to sign when I casually added, oh, by the way, as soon as you sign, I will be managing all your remaining affairs until you recover. It's a requirement. The academician doesn't want his patient distracted by business. That sentence was the final drop that soothed all his suspicions. The idea of offloading all his problems onto me, having the surgery peacefully, and returning healthy to take everything back blinded him. I see. He scrawled his signature at the bottom. Watching his signature dry, a weight lifted from my soul. I stood up, walked over to him, and extended my gloved right hand. A pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Thorne. Good luck with the surgery. He looked at me with the disdain of a victor and shook my hand firmly, almost painfully. I'll be counting on your prayers. He walked out with a light step, thinking he was on the road to a new life, not knowing it was the road to the gallows. The moment he was gone, I scanned the contract and sent it to the Vance Corporation's legal team. Begin, I wrote. Half an hour later, an official statement was released. Chairman Ethan Thorne was undergoing major surgery, all assets were being transferred to the management of Catherine Vance. Simultaneously, New York banks, courts, and the IRS received lawsuits from us to collect colossal debts from the holding company, and from Thorne personally. The financial storm began at my command, and Ethan knew nothing. He booked the most luxurious ballroom in New York and threw a grand party to celebrate his impending recovery, summoning the elite to boast one last time about his victory. He announced that the great Dr. Finch himself would save him. Everyone congratulated him. And then, the party was crashed by Victor, his cousin, accompanied by detectives from the district attorney's office. Ethan, Victor smiled maliciously. Market manipulation, commercial bribery, fraud. You're coming with us. Ethan's smile froze. Impossible. Where's your proof? He screamed. Proof? Victor laughed, pointing at me. I was calmly sipping wine in a corner. Didn't you give it to Miss Vance yourself to pass on to the investigators? Ethan whipped his head toward me, his eyes wide with horror. He understood everything. There was no triumph. He had been a pathetic fool all along, a puppet I played with as I pleased. Catherine, he roared, lunging at me, but the detectives tackled him and threw him to the floor. Cold handcuffs snapped onto his wrists. I walked over to him with my glass and crouched down, looking into his eyes, red with fury. Ethan, you lose. I slowly poured the rest of the red wine over his head. The red liquid streamed down his face. Now, the only one who can save you is me. He was dragged away. A storm erupted in the New York business world. Thorne's stock hit rock bottom. Banks froze his accounts. The empire crumbled to dust. And I, like a savior, announced that the Vance Corporation would absorb the holding company and its debts. Everyone admired my nobility toward my ex-husband. They didn't know it was a perfectly planned hostile takeover. Ethan was placed in a pre-trial detention center in Manhattan. Awaiting trial, crushed by bankruptcy and criminal charges, his health finally gave out. The tumor ruptured. Seizures, speech loss, incontinence. The jail, fearing liability, transferred him to the Vance Clinic. The doctors issued a critical condition notice. Ethan's parents, the same old couple who had once humiliated me, were now on their knees in my office, weeping. Katie, we beg you. For God's sake, save him. We know we were wrong. We'll bow to you. They banged their heads on the floor. I watched them with icy indifference. Too late. I pulled my leg from their grasp. Your Dr. N has already left the country. No, it can't be. Katie, you can do anything. We'll give you everything the family has left. I have no way to help. I turned my back on their cries and curses. That night, the head of the hospital called. Miss Vance, Ethan Thorne is in a coma. Intracranial pressure is critical. Brain death is imminent. Prepare the operating room in 10 minutes, I said calmly. But, Dr. N, the doctor stammered. I am Dr. N, my tone tolerated no argument. Assemble the best specialists and connect the cameras from the OR to the television in his parents' waiting room. Let them watch it live. 10 minutes later, in a sterile gown, I entered the operating room. Ethan lay in a coma, tangled in tubes. The machines beeped. He was on the brink, but his survival instinct was still there. When I approached, his lips twitched. Doctor. Save me. I leaned over him, and in front of all the shocked doctors, I removed my mask. My face, the face he hated, was revealed in the light of the surgical lamps. Then, I raised my hands and slowly pulled off the black velvet gloves. My hands were perfect. White, elegant, without a single scar, a work of art. I picked up a scalpel and twirled it between my fingers. Ethan, do you see? My voice, amplified, echoed through the operating room and into his parents' room. I am that doctor. Ethan's body convulsed. His glazed eyes focused and stared at me with absolute terror. The monitors went wild with alarms. Your hands, he rasped. Yes. They're healed. I held them up for him to see. I used the best regenerative technology, endured months of hellish pain, and restored them. They're even faster and more precise now. He understood. The one whose hands he broke was his only salvation. A wild remorse and hope flooded him. Save me, he begged with his eyes. For the sake of us once being husband and wife. All right, I nodded. I approached his head with the scalpel, aiming for the incision. His eyes filled with a crazed hope. His breathing evened out. And at the very moment he believed in his salvation, the clang of metal cut through the silence. I threw the scalpel with all my force into a metal tray. It bounced with a sickening clatter, like a funeral bell. The operating room froze. The doctors stopped breathing. The joy on Ethan's face froze, cracked, and crumbled to dust. Nothing was left in his eyes but ash and utter despair. Why? He breathed. I leaned close to his ear and whispered, I healed these hands to save people. But I never said I considered you human. His pupils dilated. I am the only one in this country who can perform this surgery, I smiled wider. But, Ethan, I don't want to. His body shook. A gurgling sound escaped his throat, and a fountain of blood erupted from his mouth, staining my gown. On the heart monitor, the pulsating line twitched, then went flat, emitting a long, piercing, continuous tone. He died not from the disease, but from absolute, soul-shattering despair at the moment of highest hope. In the waiting room, his parents screamed and collapsed. When his father, a gray-haired, crazed old man, came to, he rushed to the hors doors, screaming, "Murderer! I'll kill you!" I calmly changed and walked out into the hallway. The old man lunged at me, but Vance security tackled him to the floor. I looked down at him. "Mr. Thorne, one should be careful with one's words. Your son died from a ruptured aneurysm. Dozens of doctors are witnesses. I, a disabled person with non-functional hands, could not have saved him. I have no obligation to save strangers. Are you out of your mind?" I repeated the words his own son had once said to me. The old man choked with helpless rage. I walked down the hall. From one room, guards were escorting a woman in handcuffs and a prison jumpsuit. Her hands were in heavy bandages, her bones crushed to powder with no chance of recovery. It was Sophia. She had been brought from the detention center to say goodbye to Ethan. She saw me, and she saw my perfect hands. Her eyes nearly bulged from their sockets. "Your hands? How could they be healed?" she shrieked. I walked over, wiggled my fingers in front of her face, and smiled. "Yes, they healed. Unlike yours. You'll be a cripple for the rest of your days. Oh, and," I leaned in close, like the devil himself, "I forgot to tell you. Ethan just died on my operating table. I could have saved him. But I chose not to." Sophia froze. The malice on her face was replaced by an endless, black terror. She let out an inhuman scream, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed. I watched the chaos with satisfaction. Ethan, Sophia, the Thornes, everyone who had hurt me had paid their price. The curtain had fallen. Ethan Thorne's death was a non-event in New York. A bankrupt criminal is just one-day gossip. The Thorne family collapsed. The father had a stroke. The mother was committed to a psychiatric hospital. Sophia went insane in prison and, a few months later, hanged herself with a bedsheet. And I began a new chapter. I restructured Thorne Enterprises, integrating it into the Vance Corporation. Our empire's market capitalization tripled. We became the #1 medical monopoly in the country. I never picked up a scalpel again. These hands became a symbol of my power. I founded the Catherine Vance Medical Foundation, investing billions of dollars in young, brilliant minds. They called me the godmother of medicine. 2 years later, the National Medical Congress in Miami. A team from my foundation had discovered new treatments for Parkinson's disease and won a national medical award. On stage, the young team leader said with tears in his eyes, "We thank Catherine Vance. Without her miraculous hands and her will, we wouldn't be here." The hall erupted in applause. All cameras turned to me. I stood and simply raised my perfect, white hands. Awe shone in people's eyes. After the ceremony, a journalist asked me, "They say your hands were once nearly destroyed. What gave you the strength to go through hell and be reborn? Love?" I scoffed internally, remembering the man who lay under the spotlight, choking on his own blood and despair. I looked into the camera and shook my head, my smile serene. No, not love. It was hatred, and the will to be reborn. I should thank the one who destroyed me. He taught me that an end is just a beginning, and that the only person you can ever trust is yourself. I smiled a dazzling, free smile. Outside the window, the bright southern sun was shining. My life was just beginning.